Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the Ukrainian conflict. Now, I don't know when this will be released because I'm trying out a new thing whereby I am doing my extras and then they get restricted and then I appeal that, and it usually takes 3 days, and then more often than not the appeal gets accepted, and that, so I'm doing it, so I'm 3 days behind. So these aren't the most timely, but they are just general conversation pieces about things that I find and come across. So hopefully that's a way around the ATP Geo issue I am having. Anyway, enough of that. Where should we start? So we're going to start with a bit of American politics, and I just find this a really fascinating clip. It does make me want to shout a lot. I'll try not to shout. No report says, amazed by the ignorance of this congressman. The less than 5%, and you don't know what he's going to say yet, but the topic is at least partially this. Less than 5% of Ukrainians are ready to make territorial concessions to end the war. In other words, Ukrainians aren't ready to sit down with the Russians and say, yeah, we'll give you the Donbass if the war stops, right? Less than 5% of Ukrainians want that. The Ukrainian government has expressed numerous times it will not concede sovereign territory. Russia, as everyone knows, and they have expressed, will not return occupied territory either. They already consider it theirs by illegally annexing it. There is only one way for Ukraine, and that is kicking Russia out of Ukraine, which Ukrainians are still very much willing to do. But by starting peace talks now, while knowing for sure that Ukraine will lose land, you allow waging war and illegally invading other countries to become the renewed successful formula for 2023 for something simply called land grabbing. It is a precedent for global instability. This is a really well put tweet here by Null Reports. And there's something, we've talked about this many times, we already know this, but let's just revisit it, okay? If you go to the table and force some kind of diplomatic peace agreement between these two warring nations, such that there has to be a compromise, because naturally there will have to be a compromise. If both players want something completely different and you want a peace deal to come out of that, then you're going to have to find something that's mutually agreeable, which means both sides giving up something to come to an agreement. So if that's what you're going for, then you will almost necessarily be giving a precedent for other countries to invade countries, be forced to diplomacy, and then the invaded country have to give up some of their land to the invader. This is basically saying, it's like bringing out a law saying, oh, if a burglar comes to your house and steals your money, we have to allow the burglar to have half your money just because we don't want any argy-bargy. Oh, what kind of law is that? But that's essentially what this allows for. Anyway, let's go to the source here. And this is Jim Sciutto of CNN interviewing a Republican congressman, Rosendale. And what Rosendale says here makes me want to spit lava.
We are helping destroy a nation and kill people.
Who's destroying the nation?
I'm going to be interrupting this quite a lot. I do apologize. We are destroying a nation. We are destroying a nation. So this is the US are destroying a nation by providing assistance. So let's take it back to an analogy again, right? Is you see an old granny getting beaten up on the side of the road. So you go up to the granny and give her like some mace, right? And the granny sprays mace in the mugger's eyes, right, to stop the mugger from beating her up. And then someone else looks by and says, "Look at all the violence you are causing." Like the person that's providing the mace so that the granny can defend herself. Like blaming, it's not even victim blaming, it's like assistance blaming. No. Hang on. This wouldn't have to be necessary at all if the mugger wasn't beating up the old granny. So, hang on. How about you just take your view and just look over at the real culprit here?
Russia invaded.
Both sides a nation and kill people.
Who's destroying the nation? Russia
both
invaded.
Sides.
How is Russia?
Both sides. This is total both sidesism. I bloody hate this, right? Who's destroying the nation? Both sides. He's giving at least 50% blame to the Ukrainians for killing people when they've been invaded. Imagine if the US was invaded and the rest of the world said exactly what he's saying now. Imagine that. I want to sit down with this guy and I want to argue to toss with him over this because, dagnammit, he is a lot of wrong. He's like 7 shades of wrong.
People.
Who's destroying the nation? Russia
Both
invaded.
sides.
How is Ukraine destroying its own country by defending itself from an invasion?
Look, both sides are being funded by other.
So notice he doesn't answer the question. So this is where Jim Sciutto does an okay job here, but he needs to take on a bit of Mehdi Hassan. I don't even know Mehdi Hassan. He now has a show on Peacock where he's basically renowned as one of the toughest interviewers. He's a British guy, British Muslim guy who got quite famous on Question Time, which is a UK political show, for being like really good kind of debating, putting his point across. He's done public debates. He's written a book just now, How to Win a Debate or something like that. I've read it. It's really, actually, I listened to it as an audiobook. It's really worth listening to. Very good. Mehdi Hassan is brilliant, and he doesn't let anything go. So he would be on to Rosendale, and he wouldn't let it get past this point until they bottomed this out. Whereas a lot of interviewers allow people to go on. They challenge them a bit, but then in the interest of like moving things on, they allow them to go on, and that allows all sorts of evils to take place. That allows people to get away with a load of stuff. Whereas Mehdi Hassan would say, no. That point, no, I'm not going anywhere, and we're not finishing this until we bottom out what you've just said. And that's what Jim Sciutto here should be doing. But he allows him to go on. So the point is, how the question is, how are Ukrainians, responsible for all these deaths when they're defending their nation? And he allows Rosendale to get away with it.
How is Ukraine destroying its own country by defending itself from an invasion?
Look, both sides are being funded by other countries, okay? They are providing.
So this is now onto a funding discussion. No. You answer the question, mate.
One to defend itself and one to invade another country. That's fundamentally different.
Sure. And if we don't.
That's fundamentally different. Sure. Okay, are you accepting it is fundamentally different? And then he goes on to make some other BS statement.
Push them towards a peace accord. It's going to continue, Jim. And I, for one.
If we don't push them to a peace accord, it will continue. So what we're saying is that no one's allowed to defend themselves. And the longer someone defends themselves, the more we need to push them to compromise. The more a burglar attacks a house, the more we need to push you guys to an agreement. The whole idea is we need to have some kind of agreement. We need peace. Rather than you're a criminal and you've done a criminal thing and we need to hold you to account and we need to help the victim not be attacked by you as a criminal in their own home. The whole framing of this is wrong. It's as if, I'm not saying like other nations are necessarily police, but that is the analogy here, is that the police are only interested in peace rather than justice.
Don't want to participate in continuing to see Ukrainians get killed, to see you.
Why are Ukrainians getting killed? We don't want to see them get killed, so we need to stop Russia killing them. Not, we need to stop them by telling them to give up their country to the people that are killing them.
Ukraine soil be destroyed. Good
Ukrainians
agricultural soil.
want to defend themselves from that, and they're asking for help to do it. How does it help them for them to defend themselves? They're fighting to defend themselves from that invasion.
There's a lot of Ukrainians that would sit down and be really glad to come to the table and sit down and have a discussion about a peace accord too. And
do you know what Sciutto here calls them out on that, but it needs to be way more robust. It's like, no, not a lot of Ukrainians do actually. Percentage-wise, a tiny minority do. And why? Because actually they're of, Russian descent and so on and so forth.
Jim, I guarantee you.
No, that's certainly not where the public support is in that country for this war,
Well,
or for their president.
The public support isn't here in our country.
So notice what he does here. He switches. So it's almost like a bait and switch, or it's like a red herring or a non sequitur or whatever. There's so many logical fallacies going on here where the guy is questions on something and he kind of red herrings it by tenuous link to something else. And he says, well, most Ukrainians don't believe that in their own country. And he then goes, yeah, well, most Americans don't believe blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this. But unfortunately, he's allowed to get away with it a bit too much.
Discussion about a peace accord too, Jim. I guarantee you.
No, that's certainly not where the public support is in that country for this war,
well,
or for their president.
The public support isn't here in our country to continue to support an unending war.
Irrelevant. Two different things.
That we don't have any policy plans or program laid out in what our goals are.
I understand that, and I know you've been very strong on China. Every intelligence official I've spoken to in this country and in Europe and in Asia, by the way, I went to Taiwan earlier this summer, says that China is watching for how the world responds to Ukraine to make a judgment as to how the world would respond if it were to invade Taiwan. Why would it be a good thing to let Russia gain territory in Ukraine? Wouldn't that send a signal to China that, hey, it might get away with an invasion of Taiwan?
So what you're just about to hear is actually a massive contradiction from Rosendale here. That is just renders his whole argument just a bunch of nonsensical mush.
I'll tell you what does send a signal to China. That is canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, canceling the sanctions that we had on the Nord Stream 2 gas line, taking our national debt, taking our national debt.
I mean, sidebar. Nord Stream has been blown up, mate. Move on.
Taking our national debt, which is at $33 trillion, and adding another $3 trillion a year to it so that China and Russia can get together and...
So notice now he's saying China and Russia are going to get together. So now he's actually saying where this argument started is, well, how do we solve the China problem? And actually, he's saying, well, China and Russia are getting together to do X, Y, and Z. Oh, right. So we do need to stop Russia doing stuff. So part of stopping China doing stuff is actually impacting Russia, because you're admitting that yourself, because Russia and China are getting together. I mean, this is a kind of contradiction. He talks about BRICS, which is going on. It's like the war on Russia in Ukraine and helping Ukraine to defend itself against Russia is an attack on BRICS by extension. Like, it is degrading the capability of BRICS and then sending a sign to the whole of BRICS that no, this isn't an alternate hegemony that's going to work, right? But so this guy is essentially having a garbled approach to the China problem. Sorry, I'll rewind it a little bit.
$3 trillion a year to it so that China and Russia can get together and work with the Saudis to use a different petrodollar than the U.S. currency, watching BRICS get together and make a decision about whether they want to utilize another reserve currency instead of the U.S. dollar.
I'll tell you what would be a really good thing to stop that happening, Congressman, and that would be degrading the Russian military capability and putting them under sanction so that their hydrocarbons are a massive source of issue, and they're not getting any income, and the rest of the world is not depending on Russia and by extension BRICS in terms of energy, so on and so forth. All these knock-on effects that all point towards Russia being crippled going forward, right? If you are interested in taking power away from BRICS because you're worried about China and BRICS somehow underpins China, then supporting Ukraine is one of the very best ways of doing that. Just like from start to finish, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. How are you a politician that has some input on foreign policy? I don't know. I mean, but I do also do. Yeah, Jim Scuto did, or however you pronounce his name, did a fairly good job there, like an okay job. He challenged him, but he was a bit like a bit nice about it. I would have been like, no, mate, I'm not standing for this. I'm not standing for this abject nonsense. Sorry. Not sorry. Right, okay. Moving on. No reports again. It is not one man or his circle. It's a lot of people supporting this invasion, scum of the earth. This is interesting, though. This is Steve Rosenberg of the BBC doing a little segment here, Vox Pop segment, where recently there was this rally concert in Red Square again, a year on, although it wasn't really as shouted about as much as the previous one. And the previous one, there's lots of stories about people being shipped there, being bribed to go there, and you're kind of thinking actually there's not that many people that support Russia and Putin as strongly as one might think. It'd be really interesting to get inside the minds of some of these people. So Steve Rosenberg, who's still able to operate in Moscow and is doing a pretty good job, actually, by all accounts. He's doing some good journalism out there. Now, here, just the reactions to this are fascinating. I'm going to leave this in its version originale, but I will try and read the subtitles as well, because I think it's really important that you hear the voices here and how they're reacting to Steve Rosenberg's question. So I'll be going back and forwards so you'll get an idea, because I know some of you listen. And there is a variety of reactions here. Some are obviously staunchly pro-Putin, but even some of those are with kind of caveats that are quite interesting. We'll unpick this video as well. So you've got a Russian person with face painted and with a Russian flag. These are a bunch of young people queuing up to go to this rally, I presume. You've got Steve Rosenberg walking along. And he says, can I ask you, why have you come to the concert? And listen to their answers with Russian flags on their faces. Why? He says. And the other guy says, so why? And he asks his mate, why? As in, there's no clear answer. If you knew why, if you felt really strongly, even though you got Russian flag painted on your face, if you felt really strongly, you'd be like, yeah, because God damn those Ukrainians and blah, blah, blah. And you'd be really strongly in support of whatever this rally is about. But they either don't really know why they're there, or they know why they are there and they know it's embarrassing. And they know it's not cool, or it's wrong, or there's some issue with being able to publicly accept why they are there, which is in itself an interesting reaction. So it'd be either of those reactions are worthy of note. And then he asks back to his mate, why have we come to the concert? So the first guy says why, and then the other guy goes, why have we come to the concert? Why have you come here today? This is another young guy, looks in his sort of early 20s, maybe early to mid 20s. First of all, he says, first of all, that's a very good question. So again, this is another guy who's either too embarrassed, I don't really want to answer it because I don't want to say because I love Putin, because I love the war, because I hate Ukrainians, because it's obviously something he doesn't believe, or if he does believe it, he knows it's wrong. He says, that's a very good question, but I can't answer it. And look at him, he's embarrassed. And then he asks another guy, what's the concert? To be honest, I don't know. So either he genuinely doesn't know why he's there, in which case this is an example of someone being dragged along to a concert. They've been we heard last year that there were employees that were made to go as part of their like orders from the employers, with orders from the Kremlin, or so he's dragged along, doesn't really know, or I don't know, he's gone along for a laugh but doesn't really know what it's about, or he does know, but again, he's too embarrassed to say. Either of those answers, all of those answers are not a good look for the Russians here. To be honest, I don't know, I just came along with my friends. To support the crowd, he says, like waggling his head. To support, what does that even mean? I came to support the crowd. And you've got organisers that are being very, very particular with where people are standing, what's going on. Stand here, she's shouting. Like, all right, you're going to a rally to be happy. Anyway, this woman is much more sort of, of an older generation. I don't know if that's important to note. Saying we have new republics now. They've returned to the motherland. we've waited a long time for this. Yeah, but have they waited a long time for that? I know you might have wanted them as part, but what if they don't want to be part of your nation? Anyway, that's an aside.
Какие территории?
Which territories? The Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republic and Kherson and Zaporizhia. Interestingly, of which none of those are that have been annexed are fully under control of Russia. But she says they're all ours. Yeah, I don't know. Have you looked at a map recently? It's our historic motherland.
Но это Украина, нет?
But this is Ukraine, isn't it? Says the interviewer. No, this is Russia. And then we go back to those first two young guys again. Well, the guy's now got his act together. He says, we came to the concerts by metro to support our president, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. In short. I mean, as a very matter of fact, we came here to support our president. Here's his name in its full form. So it's interesting that he put it in its full form. Like if I said, I've come here to support my Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. You know, you might think that, you know, I'm not like, we've come to support my president, Maggie Thatcher. Like, you know, I don't know if it tells you something by saying the name in that way. Anyway, I'm probably looking too much into this. And it goes back to the older woman. Putin's our hero. Putin's a good guy. We love him. And then it goes to another woman, I don't know, probably in her 50s there, saying, I like Putin, she says. What do you like about him? I like his policies. The only thing I don't like is that... The only thing I don't like are things that are not quite right in our country. So there's one thing I don't like, is that things aren't right in our country. That's probably quite a few things you don't like. So let's see what this one thing you don't like is. You know, petrol's expensive and all that. Healthcare's bad. We need to improve healthcare. And in rural areas, it's the same. Other than that, I like Putin. You get a sense that, yeah, I like Putin, but actually, and you get this a lot with, this is how ultra-nationalists and mill bloggers do their thing, which is, don't have a problem with Putin, but man, the army's doing a rubbish job of this war. The Shoigu's rubbish, Gerasimov is rubbish, all the military commanders are rubbish. Putin, he's great. People have learnt that you don't slag off Putin, but you can get away with being critical of Russia through criticizing anyone that's under him and the government, or, you know, the state not quite doing what they want. But hey, Putin's all right. I like Putin. So, and you know, that's not to say that she doesn't not like Putin. She probably does like Putin, and all of the state media that sells Putin as an amazing person, but on the ground, she's experienced poor healthcare, right? So she knows that healthcare is bad. So I know that Putin's awesome. I like Putin, but healthcare is bad. So things on the ground are bad. So what's going wrong? So if Putin's great and things on the ground are bad, then there's something between Putin and the ground that is going wrong. And this is how she explains that. I like Putin. Policies are good. Healthcare's bad. Rural areas is all a bit rubbish. So things aren't right in our country. Okay? Well, who's responsible for that? We go back to one of the younger guys who earlier said, it's a good question, I can't answer that. Putin won't be here today, they say to him. He won't? Look at the way he reacts. Putin won't be here, I'm off. He jokes with his friends. These are other young people. Other people smiling in the background. It's almost like all of these people know this is just a complete sham. Right, so you've got the older generation that like, I like Putin, I like everything to do. And then you're speaking to the younger generation, it's like, yeah, do you know Putin's not going to be here? He won't be here. Oh, I'm off. God, who knew? He's not going to be here, guys. Oh, we're off. Like, they don't care. You wanted to? I've never seen him in person, he says. I'd like to see Putin in person. My dream, he says. to shake his hand. Not quite sure whether what he feels about Putin there, actually. There's a bit of playing around, a bit of joking, a bit of covering up what he truly feels, but he might also quite like to meet Putin. Putin still will have massive stature amongst even the young, and they'll be probably afraid of Putin and what criticism Putin can bring about. So, Anyway, this other young chap, one of the very first young guys, a tall guy with partly a flag on his face, a small flag on his face, says, every 100 years, the Russian people rebel. Not like the French, but they really go for it in a big way. But Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin manages to keep everything under control. I don't really know what that means. He's almost saying, get ready for a revolt, or I'm in favor of a revolt, but Putin keeps everything in control. But every 100 years, we blow our tops, type thing. Yeah. Okay, but the fact that for a year and a half, there's been fighting in Ukraine, says the interviewer. I'm not a politician, says one of the older ladies we heard from earlier who didn't like the healthcare. I'm not a politician or from the military. So it's hard for me to judge. But we'd like it to be over as soon as possible. Because so many people have been wounded. And killed. So the sooner it ends, the better. If you ask me, it would be better, sorry to say this, if they use more force in Ukraine. So they seize everything more quickly. Interesting view. Yeah, it's really sad that so many people are dying and so many people are being killed. So what we need to do is be more violent and take it more quickly. Okay, interesting. Then we're back to a tall guy with a flag on his face that talked about rebelling. He said, sorry. That's our lecturer. And the lecturer says, let's not do interviews. He's protecting his students there. It's like, don't do interviews, guys. You're only going to get yourself in a slammer, and the FSB are going to be after you. And we go back to these other two older ladies who the question says armed conflict. She says armed conflict. We're restoring our territory. It's our historic territory. That's why Putin's a good guy. Good health to him, she says. So obviously a big fan of Putin. And that's like saying, oh, do you know what? Rishi Sunak, and being a man of Indian descent himself, and his wife is of Indian heritage, they're going to take Britain, and we are now invading India. India is rightfully ours. Rishi Sunak's a good guy. That's why he's a good guy, because he's taking back what's ours. Yeah. What about what India thinks here? What about what their right to self-determination might be? Of course, it's irrelevant, because these guys have just hugely imperialistic views and looking through history with rose-tinted glasses, and because they have no idea of all the terrible things Russia have done in the past, or it's kind of been forgotten. They don't learn about it. I've talked about this previously. It goes back to that Orwellian quote. If you control the past, you control the future, and if you control the present, you control the past, and it's all connected. If you control your history and what your population's idea of history is, and disinform them with a false sense of identity and a false sense of what has happened in the past, then you give them a false sense of who they are now, and then you can direct them to this kind of completely baseless idea of who they can be and where they can go and what can happen. And here, there was what Germany, and I've said this a number of times, there's a big long German word beginning with V, which is about how Germany have come to terms with the World War II and the history of Nazism and so on and so forth. They've done that difficult therapy where they have acknowledged the ills and evils of the past in order to be able to get over it. It's like an addict. You need to recognize you're an addict before you can cure yourself. You need to recognize what's happened in your history before you can can get better from that. And the Germans have done that. The Russians haven't done that. The Russians are still in a process where they are re-erecting statues to Stalin and to some of the worst communist, thugs in a sense. They are still living in this sense that there was nothing wrong with the Holodomor. There was nothing wrong with forced starvation of the population. There's nothing wrong with what happened in the Soviet past. So they haven't done that therapy. And as a result, when you have someone like Putin that's trying to get back the old empire, try to get the old boys back together, it's like, well, good health to him. Good on him. Yeah, going back to the good old days. Yeah, but were the good old days good? Yeah, that's what I've been led to believe by watching state media for 30 years. And my kids are telling me that because they're learning it at school or whatever. My grandkids. It's just, yeah. Good health to him, she says.
Кстати, его
By the way, I don't think he's coming today, says the
не
interviewer.
будет, по-моему, сегодня.
А мы его ждем. А мы его ждем.
We'll be waiting for him, she says.
Мы
The
его
other
ждем.
one.
Мы его всегда ждем. И молимся за него.
We'll be waiting for him and we pray for him. Sorry to belabor going through that, but I think it's interesting to get a snapshot of what different, and it's only at most anecdotal, right? But it's interesting to try and understand how people think and why they might think. Right. Let's go on to talk about the counteroffensive and where it's at. Somebody using a gif of lots of Andrew Perpetua's maps there, so good on him. Right. This is a bit of, not quite doom posting, but there's a bit of realism here that is, similar to what Andrew and myself were talking through in the live stream we had. Go and check out that live stream, where I think, in some sense, there's a culmination. In another sense, I think that the Ukrainians have need to step back and let distance munitions do a couple more months of really heavy attrition. Drones, Storm Shadows, Scalps, hopefully ATAC and Centaurus, and Excalibur, HIMARS, JDAMs, and hopefully GLSDB. You have 2 months, 3 months of that going on, and you attrit the Russians to such a fundamental level. It's the same as doing your air support, but where that you would do suppression of enemy air defenses, destruction of enemy air defenses for a month or whatever. This is going to take an awful lot longer because you can't flatten everywhere with the immense amount of bombs you would dropping them from an A-10 Warthog or something. So this is it will take longer, but I think that's the phase we're now in, and it's I don't know that we're going to see an awful lot of territorial gain from infantry maneuvers involving a bunch of armor getting destroyed and a bunch of troops getting taken out and trying to take a trench. So this source says a deadly miscalculation of 2022 was that air defense assets would negate the use of jets for both sides. By now, Russia is throwing 1,000 guided bombs per month to great effect. Orikhiv, so that's just north of Robotyne, the town on the Ukrainian side behind Robotyne, will be gone soon. All of those red plane symbols, that's on the map that you can see there, multiple bombs each, a massive strain on the Ukrainian air forces. You'll see me post some negative content from now on, and I promise you I want nothing more than the best for Ukraine. Things need to change, and this miscalculation needs to be talked about, and other ones. Neither side feels comfortable putting air defense forward because radars are astonishingly bad at detecting slow, fixed-wing drones. Anything you put forward will get spotted and destroyed by a PGM or precision-guided munition or surprise another drone it can't detect. So I've talked about how I think you should move Patriot systems to the front, but in order to do that, you need to protect them really damned well with a load of Gepards and whatever else to take out any drones or any missiles that get near to taking that Patriot out. But absent of that, people are just both sides are afraid to move their substantial air defenses closer to the front lines, which means means that planes can still operate, and particularly Russian planes that have a greater range advantage with their air-to-air missiles. So the Ukrainian planes aren't so happy with going so far forward. So that gives the Russians an advantage with their FAB 500 bombs and so on and so forth. They can drop their guided bombs much further away from the front line, but closer than the Ukrainians can get as well. Now, this gives jets freedom, and the Russians were smart enough to exploit it. Ukraine does not have the hardware to even remotely do the same or stop the Russians from doing it. It is just Su-34s flying at altitude along the coast all day, dropping glide bombs with next to no worry. JDAMsky massively trumped JDAM-ER. Nobody cares if JDAM-ER can pinpoint a hamster. We have to dig out PDFs to inform ourselves about esoteric naval mines to find out just how few wing kits exist, while Russia is churning out 1,000 kits a month. So this is the idea that the JDAMs of the allies of the American JDAMs are really precise, can hit a hamster from 50 kilometers away or whatever. Yeah, great. However, they're getting jammed, and the Russians are producing shed loads of these relatively cheaply. And if they do get jammed, they drop down and explode anyway. They don't just shut off and the fuse doesn't work or whatever. So the Russians have this advantage. Across the board, Russia is embracing technology. The days of biblical artillery barrages over Popasna are gone, and it's working for them. The footage from some of their recent deep strikes is alarming. The drones evidently have better optics now. The Tornado missiles look suspiciously more capable, and Iranian and North Korean shells are killing Europeans. These rumors that the Tornado guided multiple launch rocket systems that have a greater range than the HIMARS, but have been absent from the war, might be starting to turn up. They might have actually created enough munitions for them to be used. And if they're using them, that means the Russians now have the advantage over the Ukrainians in terms of range with HIMARS. So I invite you to look at the pristine, shiny new Iranian Grad missiles before you make fun of them. The North Korean shells, Ukraine would kill for them. Iranian ballistic missiles have the potential to trump ATACMS because of numbers. So where will the collective West go? Freeze a conflict? The same idiots that miscalculated are now saying Russia already lost, and I don't know if I should laugh or cry. The Russians will go for Kharkiv and Odessa as soon as they have the means to do so in a frozen conflict. They are literally calling it holy ground. Effing listen to them. You're just saying they are already lost because you want convenience. There is nothing else behind it. We have already been here before. Crimea and 2 oblasts in 2014, 2 more in 2022. They will just wait and take another couple in a few years. And during all this time, they will pump your societies full of division and tear you to shreds from the inside. This is so important. And this is why I talk so much about disinformation, about trolls, about the activity of the Russians nefariously behind the scenes. It's so important. They're screwing us over, and they're doing it cheaply and effectively from that information warfare point of view. And in terms of the war, they will just wait and take off more bites if they're not fundamentally stopped now. They only understand strength. Wake the F up. NATO will be undermined from the inside, and it will work. You don't believe me, but Tucker will say, why would I care about Lithuania? I promise you. Is a really good point. And you've got Slovakia inside NATO now on the back of Russian disinformation in the Slovakian elections that was rife, now saying, not too sure about giving any more military assistance to Ukraine. Maybe accession to NATO is going to be disallowed. Maybe accession to the EU will be disallowed together with Hungary. So this, and you'll get this situation where, okay, after Ukraine, will it be Lithuania? And will you have people like Tucker Carlson saying, well, why should I care about Lithuania? And it's that old adage, and next there, and then they came for me. So I forget that whole thing. You take off a bite, and then eventually they came for me. I'll find that actually. So here it is. First they came by Pastor Martin Niemöller. I think it's this one. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So that, although that's a completely different context and whatever, and say that what you will, that's the idea here. Is if you stand by and let people take chunks out of Europe or sovereign nations and stand by and say, well, why should I care about Lithuania? And then eventually at some point you're the only one left and no one else cares about you. And there's reciprocal altruism, there's strategic positioning, there's all sorts of reasons why you should care about others. So anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a sidebar there. Right. They need to lose. So this is Russia. It is the single most important objective for Western democracy since World War II. Someone says to this, I'm sadly becoming less optimistic these days too, looking more and more like Ukraine will be forced to undertake a massively risky operation of some sort, accepting large losses to unlock the stalemate, slow progress of their advance. I don't fault the Ukrainians whatsoever. They are heroically doing what they can, and they have what they have, trying to preserve manpower losses. I think it's either that or the West goes all in, and I don't think they have the stomach for it. And the reply to that from the same original sources, it is a reasonable fear, but I believe the right arguments need to be made and enough political willpower can be generated. There's a massive psychological pressure on everyone right now. Keep your chin up, we have to. Which is, again, it's still fairly pessimistic outlook, but this is why I'm going back to, I think it's got to be an all-in. You've got to front up with your funding right now at the front end. Say, right, instead of doing it in chunks over the next year, we're gonna ring fence this funding for Ukraine. We're going to get it through Congress or whichever parliament you're talking about, and we're going to do that now in case fatigue sets in and there's political change. We're going to do that now, and then that will be ring-fenced and Ukraine will be supported. This is why the EU and a number of countries are doing long-term strategic aid to Ukraine over sort of 3 to 5 years, so that actually that is ring-fenced and it's difficult to undo, and Ukraine doesn't suffer from a lack of assistance 2 to 3 years down the line. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. I've done way too much talking, so I'm going to have to finish it here. But I thought that was, useful to have a little dip into that. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks so much for your support, as ever. Really appreciate it. So many kind people out there. Thanks, community. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.